Welcome into episode 7 of the Fourth and Whinges podcast with your hosts Mark and Rob. We're recording today for the first time in a little while. A couple of months we've been off air. Obviously a bit of downtime, not a lot going on after the draft, etc. So we've had a bit of time away, but we're back today with episode 7. How are you feeling, Rob? Looking forward to getting stuck back into this?
Yeah, really looking forward to it. It seems like it. We sort of saying to you the other day, though, it feels like this off-season's gone quite quickly for a change. I don't know if the Dynasty League has helped, just kind of throwing out some ridiculous trades. But yeah, very happy. I think it's about 5 weeks till we have proper football back. The Hall of Fame games in I think just under 2 weeks actually. So yeah, only 3 preseason games this season there, unfortunately. But we do have 17 regular season games, which is definitely a good thing from my point of view. But
absolutely. Another game for the Jags to lose. 17.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you'll notice the Clemson Lawrence jersey. In every trust.
Seen it, very nice. As I said to you just before we came on air, it's very strange. It's like you've transferred from Florida State to Clemson, and it just doesn't quite look right yet.
Well,
I'm sure I'll get used to it.
They aren't great at the moment, so we'll just have a bit of Clemson. It is made of the Lawrence Etienne connection, obviously, but yeah.
Oh, very good. So, as I said, we've been off air for a couple of months, there or thereabouts. So there's been quite a bit of news, obviously, around the NFL that we wanted to just kind of recap on some of those things, some of the kind of big stories, really. Have a bit of a chat about those. Then we've got some sort of pre-season stories to watch. So actually talking about what's kind of up and coming in pre-season and into the beginning part of the season. So we've got some quarterback battles and things like that, people returning from injury that we want to just kind of touch on. And then we're going to do a segment around college players. So for those people who don't necessarily watch a lot of college football until we get around to the draft, got some of my sort of favourite players that are on my watch list. I'm not necessarily saying they're the best at their positions, but they're some of the ones that I've spotted during like the last round of draft scouting, when I was scouting other players that are on my kind of watch list that I kind of took a shine to. So whether they end up having good seasons or not, and whether they end up getting drafted highly, we'll have to wait and see. But they're certainly some of my favourite players to watch throughout the scouting that I did last year. So I just wanted to kind of mention a few of them, chuck some names out there. And then we're going to have we've got a Whinge of the Week in true Fourth and Whinges style, and it's Rob up this week. So we'll wait and see what he has to say. So with that, we'll kick off the news section. First up, we've got Cam Akers.
Yeah, what a shame. I know it's ruined a certain person's fantasy seasons because he had him in a number of teams. Sorry, Gert. So for people that don't know, he sort of emerged as their lead back towards the end of last season. They took him in the second round of the 2020 draft. He led them with 625 rushing yards last season as a rookie. And he's torn his Achilles, so he's going to be out for the season, which is a terrible shame for him because I think he was primed to have a great season, especially in that offense now. They've got Matt Stafford and everything else that's there with, Sean McVay's mastery. I think I was quite looking forward to watching Cam Akers play there. So, yeah, massive shame for him, massive shame for the Rams.
Yeah, definitely. It's a horrible injury as well, Achilles, isn't it? I think sometimes it can take a long, long time to get back. I think it's a definite season. I think sometimes, though, people can even struggle longer than that. Apparently, it can be horrific. Can an Achilles? You want a break or something like that, don't you? You don't want ligaments and stuff like that, do you? You just not good. So it's a bit of a blow for, like you say, for the Rams and certainly for Akers, one of the best young backs in the league for sure.
Definitely.
Kind of nailed down that job. In his coming into his second season, and unfortunately for him, something like that happens. I mean, it happens every year. Every year you get them in pre-season or even before pre-season, it happens.
Yeah.
But very sad for him. So the Rams' backfield is a bit of a mystery, really.
Yeah, I guess so. So they've got Darrell Henderson, who obviously he spent a lot of time in that backfield last season. Also Malcolm Brown, who was left, and I think he's gone to Miami. I think he went to. So yeah, you're assuming Darrell Henderson will step in. They also have Xavier Jones, who they took last year in the draft, and they have Jake Funk, who they took in the 7th round this year. I think there's a couple of others there as well. So for me, we're sort of talking, they're going to trade for somebody, are they going to sign a veteran, who's out there as a free agent? They are very much, for me, well, they always seem to be perpetually in win now mode at the moment, certainly since Sean McVay took over. They traded away a lot of draft picks to go and get Matt Stafford. Les Snead has shown time and time again that he's willing to go out and pay for people and trade picks. So I'm fully expecting them to, at the very least, sign a free agent, but potentially to go and trade for somebody. So what we could do is, if we wanted to just kind of throw some names out there and just have a bit of a quick chat on it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Do you have anybody to start with? What do you think? I'll let you go first, really.
Well, the obvious one for me was Todd Gurley, just for the romanticism of it. He's a free agent. I know his knees have gone. I know he was in Atlanta. He wasn't fantastic last season, but he's going to be there. And I'd just quite like to see it from a storyline point of view. I don't think he's the best free agent out there. I think for me, it's the one that stands out. I mean, there's one obvious one, but I might let you have that one. But I was thinking maybe Duke Johnson. I think he was I always liked him at Cleveland. He was he's been at the Texans for a couple of seasons. He's a good receiving back, good change of pace. I think if he's on a decent team and he has a decent play caller, I think they can really get the best out of Duke Johnson. He wouldn't cost them a lot of money. He's available at the moment, and I think he could definitely step in and do a job for them right away. He wouldn't cause you any off-field problems, unlike a certain other person that's out there in the free agent market at the moment. So I'm going to go. If they're going to go free agent, I think I'll be looking at Duke Johnson.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming you're talking about Le'Veon Bell there, but I was
talking about Le'Veon Bell.
For me, yeah, Bell potentially. I mean, he came into Kansas City. Obviously, I wasn't at the time. I remember saying that I wasn't a fan of us picking him up. I know we were a little bit light at running back, but I didn't see the need for somebody like him, and I was concerned about his kind of effect in the changing rooms. But by all accounts, he was no problem as far as I'm aware, anyway. And so maybe he would be a good signing. I think that to me is more likely, given their history of kind of chasing names. Sometimes they like to go after the big names. So, and I would certainly say that Le'Veon Bell is a much bigger name than Duke Johnson. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Bell ended up there. I don't think there's too much out there, to be honest, unless you're going to go and try and trade for somebody. But who's going to let one of their best running backs go? I can't really see it, to be honest. Jamal Robinson at the Jags is an interesting one, though, because obviously last year had an amazing season as an undrafted free agent, I think, but then you go ahead and sign and draft Travis Etienne. So what happens to Robinson? If he's sat there feeling like he's been hard done to and he's going to end up being the number 2 back, maybe he put a request in or something like that. I don't know. I mean, it would seem silly from a Jags point of view to let him go, because you could potentially play both of those players at the same time on the pitch, get Etienne out wide and Robinson in the backfield. So it would seem a bit of a silly thing for the Jags to do. But all I was thinking there is, if Robinson was a bit disgruntled, maybe he could force something like that. But for me, Bell is the obvious choice, I think.
I think, in terms of Robinson, I had him down as a bit of a trade candidate, but I think Robinson would have to create some problems for us, and I think the Rams would have to come in and, I would have to say probably be a 2nd round pick or something, because otherwise I don't think it's worth it. You look at, I don't think, as much as we hate it in fantasy circles at the moment, there's not too many teams where there is a clear number 1. You look, quite a lot of them do running backs by committee. You look at the Browns. They've got Nick Chubb and they've got Kareem Hunt, and that's a great tandem for them, and that's paid dividends. So I would hope that we would use Etienne and Robinson in the same way. Obviously, Robinson's a lot more of a runner. Etienne was lining up out wide at some of the OTAs earlier on, just sort of after the draft. He's a good receiving back, good change of pace, and if we can use them both effectively, it's just going to massively add to our ground game. We would have a decent quarterback. There's some good wide receivers out there, so certainly I wouldn't want to lose him unless somebody came in and blew us out of the water. Sorry, I turned that into a Jags segment then.
No, I agree. I think the most, as I said before, the most likely for me though is Le'Veon Bell. I think if he's a free agent, it's not going to cost them anything. Get him in, he's a proven commodity, especially in the pass game, which I think Stafford's going to be all over that offense this season. I think it's going to be very pass heavy. So that to me is where I think they will go.
What do you think of Marlon Mack?
I'm not a big fan, really, to be honest. So a lot of people seem to love him, but I'm not particularly a fan. Maybe it's because I haven't seen a lot. Maybe, I don't know, but I just think he's just a name, really, just a body. So
he had a 1,000-yard season a couple of seasons ago before he got injured.
Yeah, I'd say maybe it's because I've not seen a lot of him, but I'm certainly not like a massive Marlon Mack fan at this point.
He was just interesting to me with them having Jonathan Taylor and then having Nyheim Hines there as well.
Yeah, they've got
Jordan Wilkins. So
yeah, they've got a few options.
Yeah, I think they'd be open to it. It's whether or not they're willing to cough anything up. But other free agents, the only other free agents I had down was Devonta Freeman, who showed nothing last season at the Giants. Really, there's not a lot of it's fairly slim pickings, really.
Yeah, definitely, and I think absolutely. Freeman, I was never a fan of him coming out, and when he was absolutely taking the league by storm for Atlanta when he first got drafted by them, I remember Sean was a big fan.
Yeah.
Time, wasn't he? And he had a couple of undoubtedly really, really good seasons. And then for me, you saw who he really was. Then he kind of tailed off, and like you say, he's not done anything since he didn't get re-signed in Atlanta. So yeah. So the next thing we wanted to, sticking on the sort of injury front, Michael Thomas, not as much of a blow in the sense that it's ankle ligaments, not an Achilles. It's not something as serious as an Achilles injury, but still, ankle ligaments, maybe 4 or 5 months potentially, something like that, in terms of a time frame. But is it time to get slightly worried about Michael Thomas? Somebody who I've always been high on since he first came in the season. I love the guy. I think he's a brilliant wide receiver. But if you look at the kind of the facts, he's not the quickest. He's not the best route runner. I don't know that he's brilliant in any one thing. He's just a really, really good, solid wide receiver, and he's benefited from having one of the best quarterbacks in history throwing to him in his career in Drew Brees. You take that away, you take Brees away. He's had injuries now the last few seasons. Ever since he signed his kind of monster contract, he's not really done a great deal, which is often the case. So yeah, I worry about him a little bit, because even when he gets back on the pitch, he's coming off these injuries, and he's going to have potentially Taysom Hill throwing him the ball.
Jameis.
Or Jameis, but if Jameis will be throwing it deep downfield, and that's not Michael Thomas's game. So I just don't see a scenario where this season is very good for Michael Thomas, to be honest. I worry about him.
Yeah, so I think at the minute the Saints have a bye in week 6, so they talk about potentially returning week 7. But who knows what the record will be at that point. The only thing I was going to point out is that there's very little behind him in terms of on the depth chart. In the past 2 drafts, the only wide receiver they've taken was Kawaan Baker, who they took this year in the 7th. So at the minute, I would say they've got Tre'Quan Smith, who's done a little bit every now and again. Wasn't bad last season. He had a reasonable performance. They've got Marquez Callaway and Deontay Harris, and those 3 have combined for 127 receptions, 1,532 receiving yards over the past 3 seasons, and Thomas cleared that on his own in 2019. So it's not a good situation for them, I don't think. But it could potentially open up more targets for Alvin Kamara. I think Adam Troutman probably is in quite a good position now, the tight end they drafted the other year. So he would be in line to see an increased target share. And then for me, it's, do they look to trade? Do they look to sign any free agents? But again, I was going through the free agent wide receivers, and it wasn't looking great.
It's not good at this point, is it? My view on it, genuinely, is that because obviously, like you said, they've not invested a lot of draft capital on wide receivers recently. My view on that is that Brees doesn't necessarily need top tier talent, so they didn't necessarily do it when he was there. Now, I think they're in a situation coming into this season that in the past draft, the most recent one, I think their thought process was, well, we don't even know who our quarterback's going to be. We don't know who's going to win that competition. And if it's Taysom Hill, is there any point in having a stud number one wide receiver with Taysom Hill playing quarterback? I don't think there is, because I think it's going to be run heavy. It's going to be it's going to feature a lot of tight ends, like you say. Troutman probably have a really good year. But this thing of Kamara getting more targets, I'm not quite sure about that. Again, if Hill wins the job, or if Hill plays a decent part in this offense, if they kind of do almost a 50-50 split where, they give Taysom Hill 4 or 5 series a game, I think that's going to impact Kamara, because, again, the running game will be heavily focused on Taysom Hill. He will be the one taking a lot of those carries. He'll get all the goal line carries. Do you know what I mean? I can see Kamara having his worst season yet this year. That's my take of this whole situation. Don't be surprised if you've got Kamara in your starting lineup and he's not particularly productive this year.
Well, I have Thomas and Kamara in our dynasty league. So.
Well, I didn't do that on purpose. I promise. I didn't realise that. That's genuinely my concern.
No, fair enough. I did think the Taysom Hill thing is interesting, though, because I don't know if this does almost tip the balance towards him. So if you're just playing Taysom, you can mix things up behind the line of scrimmage. You even get Latavius Murray more involved. You can line Kamara up out wide. You can, I don't know, potentially have him dumping off some shorter passes. Or you start using Taysom Hill more as a tight end. So you've got, Jameis has got Troutman, and he's got Taysom Hill as sort of his little security blanket, really. And then you just change that offense. But like you said previously, Jameis isn't going to dink it and dunk it. He's going to want to lob it downfield for 70 yards, isn't he? And just
I think if Jameis wins that, and just on the flip side, if Jameis Winston does win that, or he's the quarterback that's playing the majority of snaps, I do expect Tre'Quan Smith to have a decent-ish year, because, like you say, he's the only one really that's shown much in that wide receiver room. And I did really like him coming out of college. I think he was a UCF, I think Central Florida, tall kind of wide receiver who can go up and get the ball. And Jameis is going to lob it downfield. If he can get downfield, I can see him having a decent year.
Yeah, I mean,
even with Thomas in the side, I thought Tre'Quan Smith, if Winston won the job, would have a good year. And I almost picked him in best ball the other week when we did our best ball draft. Because of that, I thought he could be a sleeper for having a really good year.
I think the only thing that I'd say against that would be that he's going to attract every team's number one corner now.
True.
Because there's nobody else to scare them. So if you lock him up, he's going to end up lobbing it to Marquez Callaway, Deontay Harris, and Coan Baker potentially.
Do they not have the infamous Lil John Humphreys or whatever he's called? What's he called?
Oh yeah,
Lil Jordan Humphrey or something like that.
Lil Jordan Humphrey, yeah, that's it, isn't it? Yeah. I think I've done him a disservice there.
Listen out for his name. He might end up being the sort of a gadget player that they use quite a bit as well, kind of toss sweeps, fly sweeps, jet sweeps, that kind of thing. So
Little Jordan Humphrey.
But yeah, I agree. The free agent wide receivers at this point, you're not talking really much, are you? Danny Amendola, Kenny Stills, Alshon Jeffrey's the big name, but again, he's somebody who doesn't really stay healthy, and he's not really done much since he had that really good year with the Eagles a few years ago.
I know D.D. Westbrook's out there just to get another former Jag in the mix. He's nothing special, but in terms of those names, he's probably up there. I mean, Golden Tate, I would say as well, but his career's firmly on the downward trajectory. He didn't really do too much last season at the Giants.
No.
I wonder who else there is to trade for, who else might potentially be available. I'm not really sure what the Saints' situation is with picks, but they're never usually shy about if they're in a bit of a rebuild, then they might just want to leave it. And
I think they will. I think this is a rebuild year. I think they're gonna find out which direction this year they're willing to go with the quarterback. I think they're gonna find out whether Taysom Hill is a viable option or not, and if not, they're gonna let Jameis, lug the ball downfield and throw 40 interceptions, and we'll see where that gets them. Because at the end of the day, they have almost been in win now mode for quite a while with what they've been doing and the wages that they pay and all the rest of it. They're right up against the cap as always, but they're not. They haven't really been that close. In all this time, and that's having a Hall of Fame quarterback in your team. So you take that away, they're not going to be anywhere near a Super Bowl for me. So for me, it should be rebuild. It should be tank and see what you've got. I would play Taysom all year, see what happens, and start building up some draft capital. Personally.
I think I've seen enough of Taysom Hill to know that he isn't a quarterback. I think he's an excellent player, but every time I've seen him start a game at quarterback, he looks like a running back or a tight end that's starting the game at quarterback. I think he gives you something different. He can pull out a throw, but if you look at it, his reading of the game, his skittishness behind the line, his first thought is to bail from that pocket and run. It's not to sort of look, see if one of his reads is open and to get the ball to them. It's to bail and to use his legs.
No, I do agree, and I do agree. Really, I think certainly for me, he's not the answer, and especially when you think that if teams are going to be able to know that he's the starting quarterback and plan for what he does well, then all he's going to be left with is the stuff that he doesn't do as well, which will really have him found out. So
definitely,
so I think if you see just Jameis win that job, then maybe they are thinking that he can be a viable option, and they're not looking to tank. I think if they're looking to tank, they probably play Taysom all year, don't they?
Yeah, I'd agree with
that. So the next one, moving away from sort of injuries, the other big news sort of over the last couple of months has got to be Julio Jones. I think it was talked about for a little while. He was clearly on the trade block going into the draft. Even they were talking, there were rumors that he was going to be traded, and where was he going to end up? And he's ended up getting traded to the Titans. Which I'm not overly keen on personally as an AJ Brown fan, a massive AJ Brown fan, because I think it will take away some of his targets. But then you could say on the flip side of that, he's still going to be the number 2 AJ Brown, so maybe it is a good thing rather than prior to him signing. Brown would be the number 1 target and get all the attention. So maybe it will be a good thing. He'll certainly get to learn from one of the league's best for a couple of years that Jones has got left, and I think they needed it. They lost Corey Davis, and who was their third wide receiver? I'm sure they lost somebody else. They lost a tight end, didn't they? They lost one of the tight ends, I think, as well. The Titans.
Johnny Smith.
That's it. Yeah. So they lost a couple of receiving threats, so they definitely needed that. But I'm not. If I'm a Titans fan, I'm not a massive fan of the trade personally. You've traded for him for a couple of years essentially. I don't see the.
See, I think they did all right. I think the Falcons were after a second. The Falcons were definitely after a first rounder, and they've got him for a 2022 second and a 2023 fourth, and they've received obviously Julio Jones and a 2023 sixth. So. You've given it up. If you think you're in win now mode, I think you've got Tannehill there, you've got Henry there, you've got AJ Brown, like you've mentioned. You won the division last year. If that's what you're doing, I think it's a good move from their point of view to build strength on strength. I think they were the number 2 ranked highest scoring offense last year, so you're building on that strength. It gives them a different option, and I like it. I think it's aggressive. It's for a year or 2, but that's what. These winning teams do, isn't it? They pay for these short-term rentals, and it's
that's essentially what it is, isn't it? It's a short-term rental for a team that thinks they can win a Super Bowl now. I don't buy it, and I wouldn't be surprised if he got injured in week 3 and we never saw him again.
I have put a bullet point on my notes of can he stay healthy? That's the big question for me. It is a big risk. I think it does make sense from the Falcons' point of view, to be honest. I know they wanted a first, but they've managed to get some draft capital back. I don't think they're going to be amazing this year, but they've got Calvin Ridley. It gives him that, he's now their undisputed number 1 receiver. I think he's already a superstar. I think he's a fantastic player. There's an opportunity there for Russell Gage, who I think has sort of flashed in patches. Obviously, they pick Kyle Pitts up, gives them another dimension there. They've still got Hayden Hurst that they can trot out. And the only sort of concern for me there is that they don't really have a true RB1. They've got Mike Davis, who filled in admirably for Christian McCaffrey last season at the Panthers, but I'm not sure he's ready to lead a team and put them on his back over the course of a season. But yeah, I like it from the Titans' point of view. I see the Titans with them being the same division as us. I see them as a bit vanilla, or a bit. I've never really been a massive fan. The uniforms are a bit naff from my point of view. They're just a bit, and I think this makes them a bit more exciting. So I like it from that point of view.
Fair enough. What about in terms of you talk about Falcons and the running back there? I mean, we talked about some free agent running backs earlier, and I mentioned Freeman and his success in Atlanta. It wouldn't surprise me if they brought him back at some point just to back Mike Davis up and maybe give him a bit of competition, because he's quite good in the receiving game, Freeman.
They've got very little. They've got Javian Hawkins, who was a UDFA this season. That well, you and I were both going to take in Dynasty. I think I picked him up in the 4th, just as a bit of a flyer. They've got Quadre Ollison as well. I think they took in the draft last year, not very highly. So they've got some youngsters behind him, but if they were going to bring in that competition, I'd have almost thought they would have done that by now. They didn't seem to be really prioritising it, but potentially bring back Freeman, give him a shot. He knows the area, and he was, like you say, I think his first season didn't really do too much, but his second and his third, he was unstoppable. And I know Sean had the World Keeper League, and I don't blame Sean for being a fan of him. I think Sean was spot on, because everything you saw for those couple of seasons, it was immense.
No, it was. And then maybe pre-season have an impact here, because again, there's going to be more injuries, unfortunately, but also some people that they think maybe can tie them over, maybe will or won't step up, and then you might see some moves towards the back end of pre-season anyway. So
and just to seamlessly link to our next topic, I do think the vaccination status of certain players is going to matter as to whether you keep them on the roster, as to whether you sign them off the street, and we can move on and talk about that now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. COVID restrictions, and that's the next thing we're going to touch on. We were just catching up prior to kind of recording, and then I mentioned to you that I'm quite surprised at the stance that the NFL has taken. I applaud them for it, but I'm surprised that they've been bold enough to say, if you're unvaccinated and you catch COVID, you're going to cause problems. As I said, personally, I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's the right way to look at it. But I'm a little bit surprised that they had the balls to sit there and say that and make that kind of the rules. And I think there's people who have some concerns about this maybe leading to games being missed, postponed, whatever, forfeited even. But I think the fact that we got through all of last year when nobody really had a clue what was going on, I think is a really good omen. And I think they took it very serious last year, and in a lot of ways they were kind of sort of leading the way in terms of all the vaccinations. All the tests that they were doing and all the precautions that they were putting in. They were one of the sports out there that didn't lose any games to this. So I think they kind of know what they're doing. They've had more time now to kind of prepare and put in other bits and pieces. So I'll be very surprised if there's a major outbreak or anything like that. I think it's just going to come down, like you said, to these unvaccinated people, players who maybe cause problems, but they'll soon get told if their team ends up having to forfeit a game.
Well, exactly, and for me, it's just the restrictions on the non-vaccinated players throughout the season. So, if you're fully vaccinated, there's no daily testing. If you're not, you're tested every day. You've got to wear masks around the facility. You've got to remain physically distant from people. You've got to quarantine after high-risk exposure to people with COVID. If you're fully vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine. You've got no travel restrictions. There's no capacity limits in the weight room. There's no, you can do all your social media. You can do your marketing. You can use saunas and steam rooms. If you're not vaccinated, you can't even leave the team hotel on an away trip. So you're just locked up. So, and then that's before you sort of bring in all the competitive elements. So if you're not vaccinated, then, and you, like you've just alluded to, if you're a cause of an outbreak and your team has to forfeit that game, your team has to cover all of the costs for the other teams, for the other players, and then you obviously forfeit that game, which is a big one. So I think we will see teams, if they're close to sort of a threshold of 100%, and there's certainly players that are lower down on the roster, I think they'll be getting cut. And if you're a free agent that isn't vaccinated, I think there's, you've got like a 5-day waiting period before you can come in off the street. If you're vaccinated, you can be in straight away, you can start, you can go. So as the season progresses, and if there's somebody sat out there on the street that's vaccinated or somebody that isn't, you can take the vaccinated person because they can come in, they can compete, and they can play for you straight away. But yeah, you're right, they have been very strong, and I think rightly so. It just sends a message.
Absolutely, it certainly does, and I'm kind of looking forward to it, and it's going to be hilarious if the last sort of week's anything to go by with some of the players' takes on it, and to watch social media and see people put out tweets and take them down 5 minutes later.
Looking at you, DeAndre.
Mentioning no names, DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah. So it's going to be an interesting one to watch throughout the year, and kind of see what happens there. See which teams have got the morons in the squad.
And I think the interesting thing for me as well, you've seen this week, there's been quite a few coaches that have left teams. Because if you're a coach, you have to be fully vaccinated in order to interact with players. So I think that, I can't remember his name, there's a guy at the Patriots that's left for this season. There was certainly another couple that I read of, just because literally you are unable to do your job. So I don't think it's in the end of that either.
No. Interesting, very interesting. And then the last sort of big news story really, for different reasons, that kind of happened over the last month or so is Carl Nassib and his news coming out as the first sort of openly gay NFL football player, which I'm one of the people that thinks that there's probably been gay NFL players for many years, but it's one of those scenarios, one of those situations where in the past just people wouldn't have been felt welcome and all the rest of it. And I think obviously today, in this day and age, it's a different world. And I think it's a really good sign that he's felt comfortable enough to come out and tell the world that, really. All the power to him for doing that and for being the first person to kind of step up and do that. And for me, what you'll see is that you'll see many more, as is always the way. You'll see a number of other people. Like I think you mentioned previous that Michael Sam was the other player that we must not have known about him when he was active in the league then. But
he came out in the pre-draft process. So he was taken the 7th round by the Rams in 2014, and I think he was at Mizzou. And it came in the pre-draft process. I remember him being taken. It was quite a big thing at the time. He never saw the field. I think he was just on practice squads. I think he might have joined the Cowboys practice squad at one point, but certainly never on the active roster. But like you, it's great, fantastic. He must feel supported now, and knows that that's not going to have any impact on his playing time. He's a reasonably high-profile player. He's not just some bottom of the roster guy. No. And there'll be loads of gay NFL players, and if it leads to more of them coming out and being happy, then great, good on it.
I saw an interesting. I listened to an interesting podcast the other day where this was touched on, and there was somebody, I can't remember which podcast it was, but they were interviewing Derek Carr, because obviously, for those who might not know, Carl Nassib now plays for the Raiders, so obviously a teammate of Derek Carr's. And Derek Carr is a very religious person, and in the interview that I was listening to, they sort of asked him about Carl Nassib and his news, and it was very interesting how he worded his response. He was basically saying something along the lines of, when the news broke, I wanted to get Carl's take on it, so I kind of spoke to him, and once he explained everything to me, I'm cool with it, and he's still my brother, and blah 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 like this. And it was kind of really interesting wording, because for me, I'm reading between the lines there, thinking he really doesn't approve, but he knows he can't say that in this interview for sure. Because I think that's probably one of the reasons, not only because it's a macho sport, it's a very kind of physical game, and there's it's very much a man's game almost. I hate to have to say that, but it kind of is. That's what it is. And I imagine the locker rooms are very kind of laddish, for want of a better word. And I think, but on top of that, America as a country are a very religious country, and that dressing room will, if they are a certain way with their religion, they won't really like that. So not only have the gay players had that kind of macho element to deal with, but also from a religious point of view. And so I think it's really good of him, and it's really positive that he's felt able to kind of come out. So that was a very, very good bit of news to hear, really.
Definitely.
Anything else you kind of want to touch on? Cowboys, Hard Knocks, will you be watching?
Yeah, but I always watch Hard Knocks. I always find it fascinating. I think last year's was a bit of a mess with COVID, and when they were jumping from the Rams to the Chargers and back again, I'm not sure it really worked. I think they did a great job in the circumstances. This was close to being my whinge of the week, that the Cowboys just seem to be on everything. I think this is the third time they've been on Hard Knocks. they've also had a season of all or nothing. But yeah, I look forward to it. I think it'd be interesting. I think the thing you do get with the Cowboys is Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones are fairly open. I can't see them sort of cutting a load of stuff from the show. You've got we're going to talk about this in a minute as well, but you've got Dak Prescott coming back from injury. You've got Zeke there. You've got some big players. You've got Mike McCarthy in his second season. There's a lot of storylines. They're obviously very popular as America's team, but yeah, we do see a bit of them.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I personally, I love the show. I think it's an amazing show for somebody who likes the NFL. If you've never watched it, you really need to give it a serious watch. I think the last couple from memory haven't been the best, but just as a show, I think the access that they give you and the way they film it, and it's an NFL films production, and they're very good at kind of making it feel a bit like a movie almost, and it's a really good watch. And you do get to see more of the characters. They're not just these people that you see play football. You get to see the kind of the more human side of the game, and then you get to the cut weeks, which is always kind of a difficult thing to watch when people are on the fringes of the squad, are kind of losing their jobs and things like that. It really kind of brings home that it's actually a job as well, not just a sport that we all love to watch. So I think it's a really, really good show. That, as I said, if you've not watched it before, you need to make sure you tune in. Cowboys, like you said, America's team. Yeah, they'll be interesting in one way or another, but it would be good to see some other teams at some point, wouldn't it? I think there's some weird qualifying criteria for it, though, I think.
You can't have a first-time head coach. You can't have made the playoffs in the past 2 years. There's a lot of things. They're the only way you can be compelled to it, but teams are allowed to automatically volunteer for it if they want to, if they want the exposure. But yeah, there are some odd qualifying criteria for it.
Yeah. So that's kind of the first little segment on some news, and then we thought we might talk. I suppose it's still kind of news in a way, but more sort of pre-season stories to watch. And one thing that's kind of happens every year, you have quarterback competition. So who's going to win the quarterback starting role for various teams, and I think this year there's a number. There's about 6 or 7 spots that are clearly up for grabs this year, and we were talking pre-recording again that at the moment I think it's the strongest from a quarterback. The NFL is the strongest it's ever been whilst I've been watching for the number of sort of top end quarterbacks who in the game, and the quarterback position as a whole is is really strong at the moment. And I think if you've not got one of those really good top end quarterbacks, you're always kind of looking. And so I think these, it's not surprising necessarily that some of these teams are searching for the right quarterback. So you've got the likes of New Orleans, Denver, Green Bay, San Francisco, the Patriots, the Bears, the Texans, with whatever's going on there. There's some really interesting battles going to be had. And we've touched on briefly, 1 or 2 of these. So New Orleans, we've touched on already with Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill. You've got Denver, the Broncos with Drew Lock, who's obviously had the starting position the last couple of years. They traded for Teddy Bridgewater, so they've got that competition. Green Bay, sorry for any Green Bay fans listening, but it's going to be one hell of a ride for you this year.
Those rumours earlier on this week that a lot of the sports books were expecting Rodgers to retire next week.
Yeah.
So we could be looking at Jordan Love versus Blake Bortles in training camp.
Yeah, that's going to be a thrill. I really genuinely feel concerned for Green Bay. They've always been my they've been up there as kind of my second team, really. Green Bay. I love the fact that they're in a tiny little sort of town in Wisconsin, up at the top of America, and you've got such history there in Green Bay from such a small little place. There's something ridiculous, isn't there? Isn't it something like what's the waiting list on season tickets at Green Bay?
I think it's insane.
It's something like 100 years or something ridiculous.
Yeah, it's something like that. It's mad. And I bet something like 40% of their season ticket holders are dead as well, because they'll have just passed it on them.
Yeah, exactly. It's they've always been a team that I've liked, throughout the years with Favre and stuff as well. He was great to watch. And then Rodgers has come in and, he's been the quarterback that I've loved to watch the most out of all these through my thing. And then we go and get Mahomes, and to me, I compared him to Rodgers throughout the draft process and stuff. And they've just been a team I've really liked. I feel really sorry for them that they're going to end up potentially this year with well, not potentially, probably almost likely that they're not going to have Aaron Rodgers. And
I struggle to feel too sorry for them. They went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, so I think they're due a little bit of downtime in the quarterback department. We've had Mark Blundell and then David Garrard have been probably our two best quarterbacks since 1995. So I struggle to conjure up too much sympathy.
Well, I don't know, who could you have had the year you took Blake Bortles? It's not all on the
I know it isn't at all. But
what's the word I'm looking for?
Self-scouting.
Yeah, something like that. But also not even just the Rodgers thing, but Devontae Adams now seemingly isn't happy, and there was something about them posting the same Twitter picture.
Yeah, so that was from The Last Dance. It was a Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan, wasn't it? That they both posted the same Instagram story, I think, at the same time. So read into that what you will.
Yeah, read into that what you will. That to me seems like they're saying that this is their last season together, which would indicate that maybe Rodgers will play, and then this will be their last year. And then I read a whole host of abuse then from Green Bay fans saying, well, if that's going to be what you do, then you'd rather you just sling your hook now kind of thing and let us get on with it. So
they don't mean that.
Interesting. So then you've got some more kind of interesting ones really around the likes of San Francisco. So everybody expects, I think, that Trey Lance is going to win that job over Garoppolo at some point. It's really a case of when will he win that job. Obviously, you don't take someone that high in the draft and trade up and give away those picks, etc., to not start the player. But I think in an ideal situation, the Niners would probably like Garoppolo to start the season, to play really well, to maybe give them some trade bait. Yeah. That's my view. Whereas if Garoppolo gets beaten out straight away, then who's going to want? The trade value is just not there. Whereas if he wins the battle, plays really well for a few weeks, and then they can go, right, he's playing really well, but Lance has come on and we want to kind of ship him and get some draft capital back. It's going to be interesting, that one.
Garoppolo's going to get injured in week 4 anyway, so it's all a move.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time before he breaks a nail or something, isn't it? And has to sit out anyway. Then you've got some other teams with rookie draft picks. So Cam Newton versus Mac Jones at the Patriots, Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle, against Justin Fields in the Bears.
It's an interesting one on that one. I think the Bears. I think they're playing the Rams, so they're due to open SoFi Stadium. I think it's on Sunday Night Football. If they go up there and they try out Andy Dalton, that's going to be a bit of a damp squib.
That's what they're going to do, apparently.
Well, I believe so. Yeah.
Apparently, Andy Dalton is their starting quarterback this year.
Well, that's what they tweeted, isn't it? QB1 and all that. So.
Yeah.
I don't think that'll last for long, to be honest.
I imagine that the Bears will start tearing seats up in their stadium if Dalton's still there, sort of weeks.
I mean, I actually don't mind Andy Dalton. I think he's had some good seasons. I do think he's become a bit of a punching bag, and probably slightly unfairly. But you've got somebody as exciting as Justin Fields sat there. You want to see him. You want to see him play. So.
You do. I feel bad for Dalton, but at the same degree, again, are you going to win a Super Bowl with Andy Dalton? Probably not. In all likelihood, and therefore, yes, you want somebody like Dalton there as your number 2. He's a brilliant backup to have. He's a really good professional by all accounts. He's somebody who's going to show Justin Fields how to be a professional footballer and do all the right things and all of that. You want somebody like that in your quarterback room, but you don't really want him. You want him holding the clipboard. You don't want him, taking snaps. And if I'm a Bears fan, if he's still a starting quarterback in weeks sort of 3, 4, 5, I'm probably getting a little bit annoyed, unless we're winning.
Yeah.
If he goes out there and starts winning, then maybe you get a bit more leeway. But and I think from a coaching point of view, I think the Bears are in a really interesting place because they're fighting for their jobs, the head coach and the other coaches, and I think they're gonna hold Justin Fields as a bit like their trump card here. And I think if it's all good and well, if Dalton wins, I think he'll be fine to stay in. But if Dalton loses, Fields will then have to come in and win, because if Fields comes in and doesn't play well, and doesn't look good, they're out of a job this year. Simple as that. You can't have taken a quarterback that high in the draft and bust, and have him bust. So I think the pressure's on Fields to a degree, from the point of view of keeping the head coaches in a job. Yeah, and then what do you expect to happen in New England? I think that's a really interesting one for me.
It is interesting because I think they really, really like Cam Newton. I think he was very good for them last season, not necessarily in terms of the on-field product, but he very quickly became a captain there, and they really liked his work ethic and everything he brought there. So I think they want him to succeed.
Yeah.
I struggle a little bit with Mac Jones, just from the kind of player he is and what I've seen of him. I don't really know why I was flying up the draft boards that high, but obviously there's talent there. I think I probably do expect Cam to open the season. I'm expecting Cam to be better. I've always been a Cam Newton fan, to be honest, but he'll have a proper off season this season, which he didn't have last year. It'll be another season removed from his injuries and everything. He had COVID last season as well, which impacted him. I think he's still a decent player. I really love Cam in his prime when the Panthers had that 15-1 season. I thought he was immense. He was incredible when he was MVP. But he was running it in from the goal line. He was making some amazing throws. He was just dancing around. Nobody could stop him. We're not going to see that again. But I think we can see something better. And I think Cam Newton is good enough at this stage to beat out Mac Jones. And I think Bill Belichick's obviously comfortable enough in his role that he will play whoever gives him the best chance of winning.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because everything I'm hearing is that Jones is really impressing, like really impressive. So I agree with you in a lot of what you've said. Then I've never been a massive Cam Newton fan per se. You can't deny that season that he had. He was like you said, he was immense, and nobody could touch him. But he's older now. He's had the injuries. He's not the same player. It's as simple as that. And he's not an accurate quarterback. He's got a big arm, but he's not accurate. So in terms of the way I think he needs to play to win in New England, he's got to be accurate, or he's got to offer you something totally different. Now, he used to offer something totally different, but he's not necessarily the same guy now. So I think the way the Patriots will want to play, they've brought in the tight ends. They've got one of my favorite kind of second tier running backs in Damian Harris, isn't it, in New England? I think old ex LSU product. I think he's a really, really good running back that doesn't get a lot of praise. I'm a big fan. I'm expecting big things of him this year. It's set up for Cam Newton to have a much better season. However, if they're not winning and he's throwing interceptions,
absolutely, yeah,
it's not going to be long before Jones gets a crack, because, like you said, Belichick just won't put up with it. If he's got another viable option on the bench, he's going to play Jones. And as I said, from all the things I'm hearing, is that Jones is playing really well and he's impressing everybody.
I just don't read too much into off-season practices. I'm sorry, that's another thing that I just don't really buy into too much.
And and then absolutely, you can't necessarily. You've got to take it with a pinch of salt, but it's certainly better from Jones's point of view than hearing that he's that he's having a nightmare and all the rest of it. I think I'm probably higher on Mac Jones than a lot of people. I think he is. I think what he's getting dinged for is that he doesn't look or feel like any of the most recent quarterbacks that have done really well. He's not necessarily athletic. He's not got the biggest arm in the world. He's not quick with his own feet, things like that. He doesn't fit the mold of a Mahomes or a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson or even a Prescott or anybody like that. He doesn't look like that. He looks more like I don't know, in terms of looks, more like a Stafford or somebody like that. And they're not as sexy. I get that, and I get that for Alabama, he had all the weapons in the world, and a lot of people will say that's why he played so well that year. But he's an accurate quarterback, and he knows what he's doing, and he can play the game, and he understands the game, and he's got the savvy, he's got the smarts, and I think that will go a long way in a Belichick team. I really do. I expect him. I think I had him mocked to New England quite a bit. I'm not surprised that he ended up there. I think I think he's going to do well. Maybe not this year, but I think long term, I think that they'll do fine with him. And then, that leaves the Texans and the mess that's going on there. Who do you expect to win that job?
I mean, I don't know. They will be winning it, but yeah. That whole thing, we probably want to. I think, in the interest of time and given where we are, we probably want to. We can discuss the Houston Texans next week potentially, but in terms of the quarterback battle, they've got Tyrod Taylor there, who was at the Chargers last year, quickly got usurped by Justin Herbert. Seems to happen everywhere he goes. Great player, great guy, just very unlucky, and he's clearly never going to be a top tier quarterback. But I think he's perfectly serviceable just to have around the building. They've got Jeff Driscoll is now in the mix there. I literally can't think of anything else to say about Jeff Driscoll. And then
I liked him in college. I liked him in his final year in college.
Okay,
but I'm not expecting him to win this battle. But then again, like you say, who's going to win it? It's probably
and then they've got Davis Mills, haven't they? Who they took in the third. He was their, that was their highest pick, and they spent it on Davis Mills from Stanford, who's had injury issues of his own. I think he's only played 11 games in college. It's a big sort of, I was going to say boom or bust, but probably boom's too high. Maybe just sort of bust or
the average or bust.
Yeah, average or bust. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I ultimately don't think it matters, because if they're not the worst team this season, then I'd be very, very surprised, which is kind of why I was so shocked that they did take Mills. To me, you're tanking this season and you're going to be taking a quarterback in the first round next year.
Yep.
I know I've said before on this podcast that I'm a big fan of, keep taking a swing, keep picking somebody until you have them. But given the paucity of picks they had this year and the needs they had across the board, it did seem very, very strange to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think we both mentioned that on a previous podcast. It was a very strange decision to essentially waste a third round pick for somebody who won't play outside of this season, even if he plays this year. I just think it's bizarre.
I mean, I fully expect him to start at some point this season, because again, Tyrod Taylor will probably get injured. If you're losing, what is the point in just chucking Tyrod Taylor out there? You may as well put your draft pick in and learn something. And if he's great,
unless they start winning with Tyrod, then I expect Mills to play a chunk of the season. And then what you'll see is that he's probably going to be serviceable, but he's not going to win your games on his own. And therefore, you're back in the quarterback mix in the draft, aren't you?
They'll probably win the first game of the season, though, because they're playing the Jags.
Like you said, we're running sort of at 50 odd minutes now, so we'll maybe should we touch on the injuries that we wanted to talk about? I think it's an interesting thing. Quickly, people returning from injuries. You've got the likes of Joe Burrow, Cincinnati quarterback, Dak Prescott, obviously the Cowboys quarterback that we touched on, Saquon Barkley, New York Giants running back, and Christian McCaffrey as well. I think for me, it's going to be between Prescott and Burrow because they're quarterbacks for kind of comeback player of the year. Don't be surprised if either of those two win that. Get your money on one of them now. Probably would be my view there. If the Cowboys do well, and I'm expecting them to have a really good season personally. I think when he was in at the start of last year for those 4 or 5 games, whatever it was before he got that horrendous injury, they just couldn't stop scoring points. Nobody could stop them. They looked amazing.
He was on pace for about 6,000 yards, I think. He was on pace for some insane.
And I think so. I think he, the talent around him there is very good. So I expect him to have a very good season. But similarly, Joe Burrow, he wasn't getting that much love last year for what he was doing, in my opinion. I think he was coming in as a starting quarterback. As a rookie quarterback on a team with essentially a crappy offensive line and getting put under pressure on nearly every snap. And, he was looking really, really good. They've obviously done a bit to try and enhance that offensive line. Not as much as some people wanted them to do in the draft, but they're still in a stronger position, and I expect him to have a very good year as well.
I'd agree with that, yeah. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd to throw to. Got Joe Mixon at running back. I think CJ Uzomah, even at tight end, might have a bit of a better season. They had some, I think they signed Riley Reif. They've got Jonah Williams back at guard. They've got I think he's in an excellent position to succeed. It'd be really interesting to see what happens. I'm expecting big things from him. I think the AFC North in general could be very interesting. Because obviously the Browns are excellent. You've got the Ravens. Steelers, I think, could do a bit of a dip. So, I'd be intrigued to see who wins that division.
Yeah, definitely.
And just on Saquon and CMC, they worry me because Saquon's still not back running the ball properly at training camp at the minute. McCaffrey's been injured quite a bit over the past couple of seasons, and he's got a very physical style that kind of lends to that. Both, superb players, and both still young, but does give me a bit of pause. Their recent injury history, to be honest.
Yes,
I'm wrong because I think they're great players and they're great to watch. But
I've got Saquon as in my dynasty, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit nervous about that, but I think if he gets back and gets fit, he's for me, he's probably arguably the top running back in the league. But he needs to stay obviously clear of injury, doesn't he? Don't rush him back. That would be my thing. If he's not ready, he's not ready. I don't care if you need wins. You don't put his kind of career on the line. It's not right.
He's still only 24 as well, isn't he?
He's still very young, but these injuries for running back, they don't have exactly the longest lifespan generally running backs anyway, do they? Unless your name's Frank Gore. So I think he's probably only got 4 or 5 prime time years left anyway. So he needs to try and get fit if he can.
Yeah.
So do you want to move on to the college section then, and we'll just kind of finish off with a few things.
I shall leave you to this.
Yeah, so I was saying to Rob before we kind of came on air that I've not really done that much I've had some wind down time from the NFL, so to speak, since we last did a podcast, and the time that I have spent around football in the last couple of months has been watching some college tape and stuff like that. That's kind of how I get through the off season, really, is to do a bit of scouting, and also we obviously have the scouting that we did through leading up to the draft. And I just wanted to kind of throw a few names out there, really, of people that I kind of spotted along the way that I'm not necessarily saying are the top people at their position. I'm not sort of saying that this is the best wide receiver in college or this is the best running back. I'm saying these are people that stood out to me when I watched film that I'm really intrigued to see more of. So I'm going to start with a tight end who plays for Iowa State, goes by the name Charlie Kohler. He's 6'6", 260, so really good size for a tight end. Graded quite well from a PFF point of view last year, 84.9% overall. His receiving grade was a little higher, 88.2. Not the best run blocking tight end out there, 59.4 his run blocking grade. But he's certainly stood out to me when I was watching tape as he's my number one rated tight end that's in college that I've seen at the moment. Apparently, reading some other kind of experts' thoughts about him, they say he's not necessarily the most athletic, and that will probably ding him quite a bit from an NFL point of view. But certainly in college, he looks great. He's got great size, great catch radius. He's dropped only 3 of 109 catchable balls in his college career. Really, really solid receiver, receiving tight end. Have you seen anything of him? Yeah, Rob,
I'll be honest, I've seen nothing. I will look him up.
Yeah, no, definitely one to watch this year. I think at tight end, tight ends like we all know they're becoming almost kind of this unicorn in the NFL. If you've got a good tight end, but as I say, he might get dinged a bit for his athleticism, but certainly in terms of college, he looks fantastic. Wide receiver that I really, really like goes by the name Drake London, USC.
Yeah, I've seen a bit of him.
Have you seen a bit of him? Yeah, 6'5", 210, so he's got really good size.
He's got all the measurables.
Yeah, didn't necessarily grade that well from a PFF point of view last year, but they've still got him ranked as their third wide receiver in this next upcoming draft class. So they obviously see something in him there, and I personally thought he looked really good. Only played 6 games last year, 502 yards for 3 touchdowns. Again, he's another one of these that's got really good catch radius because he's so tall, 6'5". But he's also got like really, really good ball skills, and he's quite sudden in his routes. Gets in and out of routes. You see him a bit play in the slot as well. So he looks like a really, really good wide receiver prospect. One to look out for sure. One of my favorite wide receivers, though. Have you seen anything of Treylon Burks?
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of Traylon Burks. Yeah.
He really is a beast. He's
your prototypical wide receiver, I would say.
Honestly, he looks amazing. I think I'm pretty sure in the draft guide that PFF have just released, the preseason draft guide, I'm pretty sure they compare him to is it Demarius Thomas, maybe?
Right. Well, that's not
the Broncos wide receiver. Really, really good looking wide receiver out of Arkansas. Their fourth graded wide receiver at the moment. Played in 9 games last year, only 811 yards. But if anybody's watched any Arkansas football in recent years, they're pretty shite. And so to get 811 yards, 7 touchdowns in 9 games, is probably actually quite an achievement in that offense. It looks like a really, really good wide receiver prospect. One I'm really looking forward to watching this year.
I think that's as a general thing, the wide receiver prospects this year look more like wide receivers. I think what makes me nervous this year is that they're all very slight. They don't weigh that much. I think you look at certainly Jalen Waddle. Absolutely. Well, Tutu Atwell would be the smallest, but tier ones. I think. Whereas I think this time round there's a lot more. Like I just said, your prototypical kind of sort of 6'3", 6'4", 220 pounds sort of thing upwards, and
it's interesting, isn't it? Because the last couple of years, I think people have been really high on the last couple of wide receiver drafts.
Yeah.
And this year, I don't think the community as a whole is as high on them. But like you say, they look like proper wide receivers. So maybe things will change come draft time. But I think it's another really strong year for wide receivers.
And you've got Chris Olave at Ohio State as well.
There's a few. Yeah, there really is some a number of wide receiver prospects this year. Some that came, like Chris Olave, that went back. We were expecting him, I think, to come out. You've got Garrett Wilson as well at Ohio State, who looks like a real player as well. One of my favorite names in college football this year, Ty Freifogel. Have you heard of him?
Nice. No, I will check him out though. He sounds excellent.
One of the best names. I can't remember who he plays for, but brilliant name. So then I wanted to just throw out a quarterback out there. I mean, everyone knows, some of the top quarterbacks that are coming out this year. You probably got the likes of Spencer Rattler for Oklahoma. He's going to probably put on a show this year and probably win the Heisman. And you've got the likes of Sam Howell at North Carolina, who I know you're interested in watching this year.
Yeah, just as we sort of spoke before the pod, just about how he copes with losing his weapons. So we were very high generally last year on North Carolina because they had Javonte Williams and they also had Michael Carter at running back. He was throwing the ball to Diami Brown and to Daz Newsome. So it'd be really interesting to see how he copes without those weapons this year. Other people probably step up, but if he does have a good season this season, then he'll be flying up draft boards, I think.
Absolutely. I think he's currently ranked like the number 2 quarterback prospect.
There's not a consensus, is there? I don't think.
No, I think if most people are highest on Rattler, I think, at Oklahoma. I'm not. I'm still on the fence with him. I think he's a bit. He reminds me too much of Manziel at this point. I think he's a better player. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a much better player. He's a much better thrower of the ball than Manziel ever was. But just his attitude. There's a Netflix series, I forget the name of it, that he was on recently. Well, I'll say recently, a few years ago when he was in high school, and he came across as a real diva. And I think it doesn't necessarily bode well for the next level, but you can't deny his skill. He's a very good player. But the quarterback I wanted to mention was the Ole Miss quarterback. He's called Matt Corral. 6'1", 205 pounds, so he kind of comes in the mold of a Baker Mayfield. That's kind of what he looks like, and he reminds me quite a bit of Baker Mayfield in that he's a bit of a gunslinger. He likes to chuck it around a lot. He's probably not as mobile necessarily as Baker, but he's not too dissimilar. Overall ranking PFF last year of 90.5, 87 passing and 76 rushing. So he graded really well. Played 11 games. Threw for just under 3,500 yards, 23 touchdowns, but 13 picks on the other side of that. And I think that's his issue. When you watch his tape, he's got some of the best highlights that you'll watch. And I came across him because I did a lot of scouting of Elijah Moore, the Ole Miss wide receiver that I took in Dynasty, that I was very high on. And he stood out as the quarterback throwing him the ball. He can throw a deep ball, as good as anybody. He just bomb after bomb after bomb, right on the money. But he sometimes he needs to be more accurate on like sort of the underneath throws and the easier throws and doing the easy things right. But in terms of kind of just watching him, he's just fantastic to watch because he slings it everywhere. A bit like a mini Jameis almost. And the last person I wanted to mention really is a cornerback. You've probably heard of this guy. I don't even know how you pronounce his name. Is it Kaiir Elam, the cornerback at Florida?
Oh, right, okay.
No, he's the one that was catching my eye when who was the cornerback that the Jags took last year before this most recent in 2020? Was it
CJ Henderson?
CJ Henderson. He was Florida, wasn't he?
Do you know what, Mark? I cannot remember.
I think he was. I think he was Florida, and I'm pretty sure that Elam in his freshman year was the corner on the other side. And I was watching all the CJ Henderson tape and thinking, who on earth is that other corner? Because he looks immense, and it's this guy. So keep an eye out.
Yeah, he was at Florida.
Yeah, so he was the freshman on the other side to Henderson when he was everybody's kind of top pick. And I'm thinking, no, you want to look at that guy on the other side. 6'2", just short of 200 pounds. Real strong man coverage, physical corner that you like. People are going to love him for his size. He looks a bit of a beast. So look out for that name. I think he'll be highly touted come next year's draft.
I shall keep an eye out.
So yeah, those were the main ones I wanted to throw out there. Really, just some names for people to kind of keep an eye out on, and no doubt I'll kind of have some more man crushes as we go through. And I think it's probably something we want to build into the podcast. Maybe each week we start covering like a position each week, or throw a section in about quarterbacks in college, running backs, etc. as we go through the season.
I'll be concentrating on punters.
Punters, yeah, and we know you like a good punter, don't we all? So that takes us to the final section, the whinge of the week, and I'll hand over to you for this.
Very, very, very brief whinge of the week this week. I was trying to think of one, and I just thought I'd say the one that came off the top of my head. So we alluded to it earlier. We're talking about the COVID vaccination stuff. My whinge of the week would be stop whinging about it. Get vaccinated. It won't be a problem. End of. Looking at you, Cole Beasley. Looking at you, DeAndre Hopkins. Get the vaccine. Chill out.
Absolutely.
Done.
Absolutely. And on that note, I think we can call it a day. It's been good to get back into it, and we're going to try and now kick on into the season, aren't we? And try and get one of these out most weeks.
Yeah, try and get weekly.
Put it in. So yeah, be good to get back into it properly and start seeing some football to comment on as well. That'd be good.
Definitely. Enjoyed it. All
right. So with that fourth down conversion, that concludes episode 7 of the Fourth and Whinges podcast, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.